portfolio.
I want to talk about some of the specific species that you've been working on. One is polar bear, and certainly one of the more covered events of your administration was your announcement of the listing of the polar bear as a threatened species, not endangered yet, but threatened. And some were confused when they read your speech on this issue, because on the one hand you were saying that the decrease in ice, its habitat, is the reason for listing, and on the other hand you were saying that you don't want this listing to be used in any way to affect climate change. In other words, by lawsuits that might deny specific oil and gas facilities that contribute to global warming. And so people are wondering, what protection does the bear really have based on your designation if global climate change cannot be considered?
Right. I don't think they're confused. I think that there are those that hoped that the listing of the polar bear, because of the fact, as you pointed out, that the sea ice is melting, that then would allow for a loophole, a backdoor opportunity to regulate greenhouse gases. And I made it very clear the day that I made my announcement that it cannot be used as that. If in fact the Endangered Species Act became the vehicle to regulate greenhouse gases, you would have a bureaucracy that would be setting some dramatic policies. That should be left to the executive and to Congress to have an open, transparent discussion about climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, what do you do about them, instead of having a law that was written in 1973 when there was no discussion about climate change, and that is to be focused upon the species. When I listed that species, the polar bear, and if you'd like, I mean, we'll go into detail.
No, we don't have that much time. I want to ask you a little bit more about climate change. But
when I listed that, many people cheered because they honestly, sincerely wanted to see the protection of the bear. But there were also those that cheered, having nothing to do with the bear, thinking, aha, we now have a loophole so that we can now regulate greenhouse gases. I said at the time it is not the right tool to use for that. The New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all editorialized and agreed that it is not the proper tool.
So the only way then that the bear habitat might be protected is a more global program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
We're looking at a variety of things. I mean, Fish and Wildlife, working on this, and the different distinct populations, what are they doing during migration, etc. But no question, we're experiencing climate change. And the loss of that sea ice has had a dramatic effect.
So, but you don't feel that individual projects in the polar bear habitat should be denied on the basis of the fact that they contribute to global warming?
No,
okay.
For this reason. You cannot, through science, state that an activity in the lower 48 somehow is having a direct effect upon a specific bear up in Alaska. You cannot make that causal connection. It's not possible.
Now you went further. You made a change to the Endangered Species Act to specifically exclude climate change from the factors that trigger what's called an interagency consultation, where scientists from different agencies consult with each other on a project. So you really, before you leave, this seems like it's a very important thing for you to make sure that climate change is not added in as a factor in the Endangered Species Act.
You know, I have a long history of working on the Endangered Species Act. I think it needs improvement. When I was a U.S. Senator, I had reform of the Endangered Species Act that had the support of bipartisan support, including Harry Reid. It came out of committee. The new rule that we have put in place, and yes, it is necessary, it does deal with Section 7, consultation, but it does not preclude any action agency that if it determines it still wishes to consult with Fish and Wildlife or the National Marine Fisheries Service, it may do so, because we made no changes to Section 9, which says that that action agency is still accountable, either through criminal charges or through civil charges, for the protection of the species. They're not going to jeopardize that.
We're talking about Endangered Species Act here. I don't want to get too arcane, but one of the rule changes that you have affected in the last couple of weeks here, it has to do with what's called Section 7, this consultation part that we're talking about. And some people are calling it a gutting of the Endangered Species Act, that you have removed the provision that requires an agency, say the National Park Service wants to build a bridge through a river that might disturb fish or something. They used to have to consult with the relevant U.S. Fish and Wildlife or National Marine Fisheries Service. You have removed that, and some people say that that's terrible for the Endangered Species Act to remove that consultation.
Of course they say that. Of course they say it's gutting the act. Anytime you make suggested changes to the Endangered Species Act, the critics say you're gutting it. They said that in the Senate. Now, let's just talk about it for a second. We are absolutely not gutting this. We've modified it so that specific examples, let's say that you're going to now say that a no hiking area around a nesting area is going to go from 15 yards to 30 yards. That is not going to have a negative impact on the species. Therefore, you need not consult.
Well, they're talking about actions that might have an impact.
And those actions that might, then the consultation will still occur. It's for those actions where the determination is this is not going to affect, this is not going to jeopardize, so that we can prioritize. And instead of doing all of this, many of which are not necessary, let's focus on where it's really going to make an impact.
Another controversial provision, allowing loaded guns in national parks. I'm sure that you've heard both sides of this.
Both sides.
Why is it necessary? That rule has been around since the Reagan era. What prompts the need for change? I mean, the Brady campaign has already sued the agency and you over this provision. Why is it necessary?
I believe in the Second Amendment rights. I also believe in the role of states. States have what are called the concealed carry weapons permit. If you have that, if you've gone through the process where law-abiding citizens have had the background check, they've been determined that they can in fact carry that concealed weapon, not long rifles, not long arms, but those which you can carry, pistols, and revolvers, etc. And you have that permit. We had a whole host of different rules on that. This now gives us consistency. It turns to federalism and says we will abide by what a state says. If a state wishes to narrow it and say, no, we don't want to have that in a national park, then a state may do so. But absent that, we're going to respect the concealed weapon carry permit.
Do you think, as the Brady campaign alleges, that it will make national parks and other federal areas more dangerous?
No, no. Once again, this does not say that all citizens can now carry these weapons. It says those who have gone through respective state processes of getting the background check, law-abiding citizens have been given the affirmation by their state that they can carry. We now recognize that.